So, upon my return, I have decided to make you all miserable again. In case you've missed me, I want you to remember just how much I informed you about all the worst things going on in the world. And I'm going to give you a nice overview of the inescapable ways in which certain people are basically poisoning you, and they will almost certainly get away with it, and it's pretty much inescapable. And this isn't some sort of conspiratorial thing. I'm going to go through published academic papers in reputable journals and government data and nothing else, and I'm not going to be speculating. I'm going to be reading it in its own words, and so I'm going to be very sensible, because I know there's a cross-section of the commentariat that quite often likes to sensationalise these sorts of things and make outlandish claims. I'm not going to be doing that. However, what I have for you is very interesting. So I saw this on Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called these days, and it really sparked my interest. So it's an account I've never followed before. It says, "For years I've been puzzled by the uniquely American obsession with disgustingly bitter IPA beer. And by the way, I really like IPA. However, I don't like American IPAs usually. There are a few nice ones, but they are right that they're really bitter. The British kind are sort of a bit like lager, but there's a sort of almost fruitiness and a tanginess to it that gives it a lot of flavour. It's like lager, but with a bit more taste, which is nice, and it's particularly nice on a hot day. I'm probably encouraging people to drink now. Don't do that. However, there is this strange bitterness, and they've said, but I finally figured it out. Bitter taste receptors are affected by serotonin in the brain. The American IPA craze is literally caused by the proliferation of SSRI and antidepressants." And what SSRI stands for is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So your serotonin, obviously, most people know this affects your mood. It's a neurochemical. It's a messenger in your brain that serves an important purpose, that tries to align your mind to have a correct response to a stimuli in a very roundabout way. And these SSRIs basically selectively inhibit this, so the serotonin stays in the system for longer before it's reuptaken back into the body, but it binds and unbinds to the receptor. So it's not like cocaine, which it binds and stays there, and so you get this really big high. It binds, unbinds, and allows a certain degree of regulation. Otherwise, people who are depressed would be the happiest people in the world, because they would be on the equivalent of a cocaine high. But they reference this study here, which I've had a look at before. My mouse is not working. Hello, mouse. Oh, no, there
Nothing
it is.
changes, you know.
Yes, making me nostalgic now, Stelios. Human taste thresholds are modulated by serotonin and noradrenaline. And noradrenaline is just produced in the stress response, which you could probably deduce. And what was found was that on this, on Reddit of all places, the people who are most likely to be in craft beer were almost 10 times more overrepresented than average to also be following SSRIs, which is a massive overlap, really. And I find this very interesting. It suggests, although this is an emergent discovery, really, so we haven't got concrete research, but we'll be getting onto that. It suggests that people may have consequences for introducing foreign elements in the sense of things that aren't your body. You're not eating foreigners, I hope. And it influences you in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect. We'd like to think that our taste in food and drink is something that's very personal to us. Some of us take great pride in having good taste. Some of us, it's completely absent. And I wasn't calling people out, it's fine. I find that this is very surprising. You wouldn't think that your taste in beer would be changed by your taste for alcohol, or vice versa. What? I said that the wrong way around, didn't I? Yeah, antidepressants give you a taste for bitter alcohol. That's what I was going for. And
I'm happy because I like lager, which isn't particularly bitter.
That's true. I mean, you can even get a pint of bitter. And next time someone orders that,
I'm
you
a
can say, are you okay? Feeling all right? You're not depressed, are you? But it's unavoidable, even if you're not taking antidepressants. There's been lots of testing in many different countries, and I think particularly in the United States, where antidepressants are more prevalent, it's very much present in runoff in the water supply. So even if you're not taking it, you're probably still on antidepressants, which is unfortunate. And most water filters do not remove it either. So what?
They're turning the frogs.
We're going to mention the
IPA
frogs.
fans.
We're mentioning the frogs later, don't you worry. But most water filters don't remove it. And so there's very little you can actually do other than collecting your own rainwater, perhaps, to avoid this potential preference for bitterness. And that's just a product of modernity now, that we're ingesting these things that change our tastes and we have no control over it. And in fact, here's a research paper here. This is looking at fluoxetine, which, if you're American, the marketing term for that, which is weird that you have those in the first place, is Prozac, which most people will be familiar with, which is an antidepressant. And this is looking at mosquito fish, and basically their behavior is when they see a predator, they freeze, and that makes them harder to spot. Yeah. Very simple so far, right?
It's like with Arnie and the Predator.
Yes, exactly like that.
He covered himself with mud, so the Predator wouldn't understand him.
They don't quite go that far.
Okay.
They also don't speak like him, I've heard. So in lab conditions, the researchers simulated a bird attack with a metal rod with a bit of rubber on the end, just to simulate a beak entering the water, right? And most animals will react instinctually to this sort of thing, and so it's quite a good test, really. You don't need an actual bird to hand, but which will probably eat all of your test subjects. And supposedly the fish that were exposed to the antidepressants were less likely to freeze in the presence of a predator, which suggests they felt less fear and anxiety in the face of a real threat. And this is
interesting. Yeah.
So not only are the antidepressants changing your tastes, but also your perception of fear and anxiety to legitimate threats, by the way. These fish could die if they're captured by a bird, is reduced. And society needs a very good threat perception to be able to defend itself. It's one of the baseline things a civilization needs to do, is to be able to enforce its borders. And this calls into question our ability to do that, doesn't it? And yeah, it's very, very worrying. And then we move on to this. So this is the frog study that was referenced by Alex Jones, and it didn't turn them gay. That's not what actually happened, but it's looking at a pesticide, commonly used pesticide, called atrazine, and I'm going to read just directly from this so I don't get accused of being, a gay frogs advocate or something. Atrazine is a potent endocrine disruptor. That endocrine just means hormonal, so hormone disruptor, so things like testosterone and the likes, that both chemically castrates and feminizes male amphibians. It depletes androgens in adult frogs and reduces androgen-dependent growth on the larynx in developing male larvae. It also disrupts normal gonadal development and feminizes the gonads of developing males, which there's a lot of overlap.
I mean, in layman's language...
In layman's language, that means that it feminizes the male frogs. Right. So it doesn't make them homosexual, it makes them very feminine. It makes them effeminate, which is a bit different, Alex Jones. But the point being here that when it comes to things like these hormones, the difference between the animal world, you may say, okay, that's all well and good, it's frogs, but actually things that tend to affect other vertebrates tend to affect all vertebrates.
People as well.
Yeah, that's why we do animal studies, right? We test things on, mice, because their systems are close enough that we can infer something from it.
Yes. There are biological continuities among the species. Wasn't it the same thing that Jordan Peterson was talking about with lobsters?
That's exactly right.
Who were given antidepressants and they were less likely to freeze and more likely to fight back. So I don't think that this is a bad thing. I think you mentioned it as a bad thing before. You described it as a bad thing.
It's playing God with human behavior. I don't know.
I don't know. I would take antidepressants if I were depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say that it's not the issue of that's not the problem. The problem is potential over prescription.
Yeah, so there's multiple layers here. Not only do I think that antidepressants are overprescribed, but there's a very different perception between the psychological world, which obviously I come from, and the lay person on the street. And a normal person on the street thinks that if I'm depressed, I take antidepressants and it helps me get better, like a regular medicine. Like you have a rash, you put some cream on it and it gets better. But it doesn't work like that, really. The medical world views antidepressants as this is something to give you a leg up, if you will, and give you basically, in a more vulgar way of putting it, give you a kick up the backside to sort your life out yourself if you're on the cusp of perhaps doing something that is permanent to your life. That's a YouTube-friendly way of saying it. So they view it as a last resort, but actually in the psychological world, we recognize that lifestyle choices are very important. And, sleep, eating well, exercise, all of these things are going to be underlined as sort this out, feeling like you've got a direction in your life, having agency. These are the sorts of things that cure depression.
Grab the bull by its horns.
Yeah, I wouldn't take up bullfighting if I were depressed personally.
Right. Didn't they find that the whole serotonin theory on depression wasn't actually...
Yeah, so I've got a little bit to say about this. So neurochemicals definitely dictate our behavior, but it's the chemical imbalance thing. They're saying that you've got a natural imbalance to your neurochemistry that has to be corrected with drugs.
Yes.
And I do dispute this argument. Obviously neurochemistry has an effect because it's your brain's way of communicating with itself. And anyone that's ever taken drugs in their life can account for the fact that if your serotonin is artificially increased, you feel better. And so that part can't be disputed, otherwise there wouldn't be any drug users. The part that's disputed is this actually the root cause of mental health problems? But I would argue it's a symptom of it and not the cause necessarily.
Right.
In that maybe people are depressed because their life is genuinely depressing. I'm more willing to take people at face value and say, maybe there are things actually wrong with your life that need to be changed. And most people who are depressed have legitimate concerns. They're not just depressed with the best life in the world. They have real concerns that are legitimate and worthy of consideration. And I think that it minimizes that and medicalizes it so pharmaceutical companies can make money from it. But it's not actually the best approach to dealing with real world problems that people suffer from. Everyone suffers from to a certain degree. But moving on to something else as well, not only do antidepressants and pesticides have an effect, but lead. This is a bit old-timey to most people. Of course, there's a well-established link between lead exposure and aggression and crime. Most people associate it with being mad, and you say mad as a hatter, they had lead in their hats and it drove them mad. I think that's a bit of a wives' tale, although there might be some truth to it. But in Britain at least, 34% of homes have at least some lead pipes in their network. And so that's not exactly an insignificant amount. And they're also more likely to be situated in specific areas, right? And so they're likely to compound a pre-existing problem. For example, you're more likely to have really old piping in poorer areas, aren't you? That people who don't have the money to redo it and modernize it. And so it seems like people who might already be inclined to commit crime are all the more encouraged by...
Accelerates the disposition.
Exactly. I'm not saying it's the root cause, but I'm saying it could be a very small contributing factor at the very least. And in fact, we've gone further than this, and here we go. This is an analysis of government data, I think, that 6.2% of the samples in our study, they did the analysis of government data, had potentially toxic levels of lead that were above the current UK limit of 10 ppb. And of course this is going to be the case in lots of parts of the world as well, not just Britain. I just used it as a test case that I'm familiar with. And then we go back to pesticides again, and this is looking at the association between exposure to pesticides and Parkinson's disease in French farmers. And basically it found that there was a clear correlation between the two, that the more exposure you have to pesticides, the more likely you were to have Parkinson's disease, and to a significant degree as well. And of course this was looking at the farmers themselves, and you might say, well, it makes more sense that the farmers are exposed to it. They're the most direct people influenced. However, then they're producing food for people, and there are trace amounts present in things like agricultural runoff, And also, it can still be present on your food. That's why, you're asked to wash your food if it's fruit or veg, is that you wash the pesticides off. But of course, unless you're very, very thorough, you're probably not going to get all of it. So there's going to be a trace amount. And whether that's significant enough to have this effect is sort of to be investigated by science. But my point here is that we're messing with things that we don't quite understand. And we could be getting ourselves into a situation. What's that film where only one woman in the world can have a child? Really good
Children
film.
of Men.
Children of Men. We could be in a sort of situation like that where we've messed with chemistry so much that our hormones are so out of whack that it simply spreads infertility so widespread that it's an existential threat to our species. And I don't think we're quite to that point yet, so please don't panic. I'm not trying to scare you. But it's sort of the worst case scenario. Obviously, getting Parkinson's disease and being aggressive and going in prison and having all of these other things isn't exactly ideal either. And yes, here's another one here. I'm going to read a little bit from this. Our analysis of 12 years of residue data published by the Expert Committee on Pesticide Residues in Food shows that there are unacceptable levels of pesticides present in the food provided through the Department of Health's School Fruit and Veg Scheme. So this found that this is even present in the fruit and vegetables provided by the government to help children eat healthily. And apparently they found residue of 123 different pesticides, some of which were linked to serious health problems such as cancer and disruption of the hormone systems. So, yes, it's not just, you, an adult watching, but your children as well are having their hormones messed with, which will undoubtedly affect their development because, of course, children are all the more vulnerable to this sort of thing because their hormones are yet to reach a steady level until they become about, in their 20s before they adjust again later on in life. And it's not just that as well. We have microplastics. This was one of my segments from, I think it was about a year ago now, how microplastics were found in male testicles, because you've got to specify these days, of course. And this was found to reduce testosterone amongst a whole host of other things. And so not only do we have all of these chemicals introduced into our water supply, we also have the microplastics as well. And
we're turning into Barbie world or something. Everything goes plastic. But it's not fantastic.
So you've moved off the grid. You're collecting your own water. You've got a very elaborate purification system. You think, okay, I can sit down, relax, maybe pour myself a cup of coffee and chill because I've proofed myself from the evils of modernity. Well, actually, caffeine has an effect on your threat perception as well. Actually, it's less likely to activate in higher consumers of caffeine, so you're less likely to perceive threats if you drink more coffee, which is interesting. I would presume it's because, this is just my guess, I'm sure there's probably research out there, but I'd imagine that it raises your rates of anxiety, which reduces your ability to create quality analyses of your situation around you. That would be my armchair psychologist guess. But I'm sure there's probably a study out there. I just wasn't able to find it. And then, of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the oral contraceptive change, which women on the pill prefer less masculine men. And they also are more likely to go for genetically dissimilar partners. A lot of modernity is starting to make sense now, isn't it? And it alters their mate selection, and if they come off the pill, it also suggests that their relationship satisfaction may change, probably likely reduced, because their hormones have changed, because they're no longer taking this artificial thing that's altering their hormones. And when you look at it like that, it's very concerning, because you could, in theory, have your hormones messed with, you could find a partner who you think you love, and then it will change, will be taken away from you, and it's all chemical. You have no control over it because it's in the food you eat, which is unavoidable mostly, and the water you drink, which is very, very difficult to avoid. So it's a very unfortunate situation, to say the least. But it's not all bad, because you may have heard of Toxoplasma gondii.
Is this the one with the cats?
It is indeed, yes.
The one that was feared to be what cats give to newborn babies.
They give it to anyone, any human being, really. So cats carry a protozoa, which is a parasitic, although not all protozoa are parasitic, organism that's single-celled. And cats carry it, and they can pass it on in things like their saliva and the likes. So I've had pet cats my entire life. I've probably got this in me somewhere, these protozoa. And I'm going to read a little bit from the study. And they said, we found that infection prevalence was consistent and a positive predictor of entrepreneurial activity and intentions at a national scale, regardless of whether previously identified economic covariates were included. Nations with higher infection also had a lower fraction of respondents citing fear of failure in inhibiting new business ventures. So it basically affects people's risk tolerance, and it does the same thing in mice. That's why it's speculated cats carry this. It's like a bioweapon that if a mouse becomes introduced to it, it makes them less afraid of cats. And the incentive for a cat to have that is obvious, right? But of course, it doesn't just because mice, their systems aren't so dissimilar to our own, that it also affects us. Although I don't think the intention is for cats to eat us, although I'm sure they would if they could. And it's also interesting that it's a toxoplasmosis positive individuals were 1.8 times more likely to have started their own businesses compared to other attendees. So this actually seems quite positive. So there you go. If you want to improve your life, if you're a bit depressed, get this parasite. It's also interesting as well that women can reliably identify from facial photographs men who are infected with toxoplasmosis, because it raises testosterone. So yeah, so if you want to go out and get a parasite, this is the one. I wouldn't recommend many of the others, but as far as parasites go, if you're a man at least, this is what you want.
Makes you more man.
Mm-hmm.
Cats make you more man.
It's true. People say cats aren't manly. Well, my cats basically help it. It's basically like the equivalent of spotting me at the gym, you know?
Yeah.
And yes, men with higher testosterone have lower levels of fluctuating symmetry in their facial features, which makes them appear more attractive and more masculine to women. And this is how this toxoplasmosis sort of mediates this interaction. And yeah, so I wanted to end on a bit of a positive note that it's not all bad. If you're worried about having your testosterone reduced by plastic, get a cat. Is my final lesson, I guess. But yes. Obviously, it's a very concerning world we live in. I think that this is far understudied, and I think part of that is just that people don't have the research literacy to understand a lot of these studies, but they should, and I think that they're very accessible, actually, if you take the time to learn the jargon. And of course, you can go on the reading list on the website and read them all yourself. I've got them all linked there. And I very much encourage people to look at this, because it should be of concern to everyone. This affects everyone on planet Earth, and it affects everyone to an extent that should be of concern, and so I want people to take it a bit more seriously. And of course, to end, I would also like to point out, this is my first segment since coming back as a guest for Lotus Eaters, so if you miss me, you can always go to the website and sign up for my premium series, where I did 171 episodes of it. You know, most of my knowledge is there, so if you want to learn things about pretty much every topic I've ever been interested in, you're more than welcome to check it out. This will scratch your itch for my depressing dulcet tones. And if you're not into that, you can always check out my YouTube, which is, of course, free. And it's going pretty well, actually. I'm happily and pleasantly surprised. So thank you for all the nice words for me leaving. And also thank you to everyone who supported me. And as always, make sure to sign up to the website.
We've been complaining about what appears to be the intentional degradation of our educational system for years now. If you went through the state school system in the UK, as I did, you will know exactly what I mean. Just listen to the man in the street interviews from the 1960s compared to those done now, and it is crystal clear that those people then have something that we don't have now. Put simply, we're being dumbed down by the powers that be on purpose, but we don't have to accept this perpetual lowering of standards. We are still a free people, and it's time to do something about it. This is why we have created courses.lotuseaters.com, a platform on which we are now offering courses which are tailor-made to reconstruct the education that has been denied to us. The first course we have available is Dr. Nima Parvini's excellent Trivium, a tripartite course consisting of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, which is the foundation and backbone of a classical education. This course will make you a better writer, speaker, and thinker, and it used to be that every 12-year-old in the country would take it. Personally, I will be doing this course with my own children to ensure they get the benefits of it for their whole lives, but it's never too late to do it, and I really think you should. We will also be producing many other courses in the future on subjects which are not topics of idle interest, but which instead will level you up as a person and make you more effective in the real world. I want to be clear, these are not YouTube videos. They are university-level lectures and coursework with a test at the end to which you will have to apply yourself. In these, we are not offering you an easy life. We are offering you the foundations of what you will need to be a part of the ascent of our civilization out of the hole that was dug for us. They are not easy, but they are rewarding. They are an investment in yourself that will provide you with skills that you will use for the rest of your life. Courses.lotuseaters.com. We will see you there.